Here on my best table, I'm going to show you my Pokemon cards. These are filed in Pokédex order by type, which isn't very canon, but you see how it's satisfying. This first folder is cards from Generation 1 and a very small few from 2. It's not necessarily impressive, you'll have noticed the Holy Charizard isn't there, and now I can tell you about it. Pokemon was the first schoolyard fad I let get to me. It just seemed really colourful and creative and full of animals and maths and exploration. There's something satisfyingly educational to all the designs and references. Before that, it was masculine, pointless things like football stickers with which I couldn't engage as much. As video games couldn't come into school, the main way this was part of primary school culture was as Pokemon cards, specifically the trading card game started by Wizards of the Coast and later bought by the Pokemon Company. I learned the game's solid web of simple rules, though I didn't know anybody who would play it with me. The way the cards were seen by those around me was just as things to swap around until you get shinier ones with higher numbers on, and you don't need to play it, you just need to get the best ones. You've won by having the high number. Before I had the, birthday money to waste on decks and booster packs, a sleazy thing I did was I would find prints of Pokemon art, often like those horrible early anime collages where the size is all wrong, with the not very likeable Ash and Pikachu all over it. You know that early aesthetic, it was like a Happy Meal, and I'd photocopy them. I don't remember where the photocopier was, but it was free as far as I was concerned, in black and white at least. And somehow those posters had some kind of entry-level trade value, which got me on the ladder of having cards, including enough of those energy cards nobody cared for, and I'd eventually construct decks that I never actually used. Maybe I constructed this fantasy of me being a very eligible playmate, but without the follow-through or the interest from others, or really the interest in others. I did end up with the pocket money to get some of those preset decks of balanced, middling aptitude and the occasional booster pack and that lovely foil you have to throw away. I would get cards at car boot sales. I used to enjoy car boot sales. It doesn't appeal now. Maybe I've become too middle class or stopped being into tat. They exploited Generation 1 as far as possible with those rocket sets where it's meant to be mistreated Pokemon, more violent, higher risk, but they were mostly just weaker than the gym sets that felt really alternative and cool. By Generation 2, the fad had passed. Cards were only in specialist geek shops out in the cities. A good load of years later, it surfaced as something worth being into again, and I caught up around Generation 4 cards with smatterings of 3, staying focused until the dawn of 5. I constructed several decks that balance out pretty well and convinced my partner at the time to play a bit. I think they were into it. The card designs often had impressive and unique art, or at least reverence for Sugimori's lovely watercolors. It's simpler, more child-friendly and colorful than other trading card games, but I think that approach specifically removed the tedious homework parts and made for a chess-like simple complexity. It's a common reference, but Pokemon is like a complex rock, paper, scissors. Tournament play understandably but unforgivingly phases out old sets. For example, in September 21, sets released before 2020 were phased out. Oof. You can still use them at home if you have a friend. I don't intend to catch up again with this bloated, expensive game of accruing addictive paper trinkets, but I've kept these separate decks of both Generation 1 and Generation 4 standard, just in case the whim occurs to both me and someone who can put up with me. I think these decks have kind of deteriorated, so don't go assessing them. They might not fit play standards now. They might not even have 60 in, but it's cool as a concept to have them ready to go. The number of Pokemon types was distilled, understandably, though it takes some adjusting to Geodude being bad against Pidgey and Articuno destroying fire types. Maybe there should be a play mode where the types are just like in the games, or maybe that's just impossible to handle. I really dug the Game Boy trading card game because it was an opportunity to actually use the mechanics of the card game I'd amassed all these pointless relics of. I adore card game video games for some reason. I guess it simulates having people to play with, but you don't have to put up with real people. There was a low-budget PC game that I also played too much. Not very good. Might have been made in Flash, HTML5. And it had this excruciating human character. I understand the online version of the game has taken off much more recently, but I can't get into that. I like how the Game Boy game rewarded you with cards for playing the game rather than paying the game. I don't know if anything I'm showing here has a high cash value. I'm not very interested in this collection anymore, but I don't like money either. Shiny cards are more trouble than they're worth. The foil peels off and they bend forwards a bit, so you can see them coming up in the deck. It's funny how the Pokeball on the back of the cards was misdesigned, but they had to stick with it because if they ever changed it, it would have de-anonymized the more recent cards. So it stayed the same for 25 years. Something that's always going to be the way in this kind of game is how tournament decks are built around exploits and extremes rather than balance and using your resources to deal with various circumstances. I don't play at that level. It doesn't feel like how the game is intended, but I respect those who find the exploits. This game is inevitably a victim of power creep, which I'll now call explain. When a balanced trading card game is released, there needs to be a competitive motive to get new cards. So the new cards must be generally superior to the existing cards, just a bit. Stretched across the generations, this means that the earliest cards now stand no chance against current cards. So the game makes them redundant and punishes those who don't keep buying. It's inflation, it's canny, and it's ugly. I enjoyed the grammar of the early game, which was reasonably intact until Generation 3. You could see its mathematical shape. Attack's damage was roughly equivalent to their energy cost at a rate of 15 per elemental energy and 10 per colorless energy, with extra attack functions having a value of about 10 and self-harming attacks balanced out as a subtraction from the damage inflicted in energy value. It was elegant and consistent, and the number of things you could do and special features was around a rate where both players, all players, can remain aware of what moves are possible. Generation 4 might be at a reasonable level of inflation, balancing between the core mechanics and the fun of some mighty and ornate options. I wouldn't discourage the game from building upon itself. I love the extra options like Pokemon powers, but they seem to feed those kids who just see the high numbers, feeding them new high numbers. Don't reward those useless masses with their disposable income. Serve my superiority complex. I guess if you really get into the modern game, you might find a similar elegance as established at a new scale, but to me it seems so overinflated with so many new subcategories, so many features that are individually meant to be the ultimate giant slayer, but they stop making sense when piled around each other. For a tertiary part of the series, it has some interesting influence back on the video games. Several attacks originated in the card game, and regional forms of Pokemon were basically invented there. The game has no idea how to incorporate baby Pokemon. I was fine with their Generation 2 attempts when the evolved form got some extra power, and it made a horrible decision to transfer poison Pokemon from the grass type to Psychic. What, are you just saying they're purple? Ghost is okay under Psychic. They're occult, spiritual, sinister. It's a ruin of an already neglected in pre-Fairy Days Pokemon type to set poison as Psychic. A couple of generations later, they finally moved poison over to Darkness type, where it actually belongs. Pokémon TCG is lovely at its core, from which it's progressively diverged in the name of capitalism and big damage. Maybe a hard reboot would be nice, a new decision to make things like Gen 1, or maybe we don't need that because we've still got those old cards. And the new game has more interesting things. I guess what I'd love to see is a properly in-house new video game version made for Nintendo portables, with the cursory RPG element and without the spectre of pay-to-play or cheap programming that makes it feel like an in-browser game. A proper sequel to the video game version. Since that won't happen, I'll go play the fan translation of the Japan-only sequel I just found, once I make it perfectly legal for me to do so. It's only in making this video that I remember having the very pretty Southern Islands promotional card set, and I think I gave it away entirely. It now sells for a lot, so as long as the person I gave it away to knows that,